What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Robbie Cassidy, and on this episode of the podcast, I'm going to explain why I want you to have pain sometimes. And now that's probably sounds a bit sadistic, but if you give me a minute, I'm going to talk you through why it can be helpful and how you can use it to your advantage, especially if you're dealing with a recurring injury, especially if you're dealing with a long-term persistent pain. And hopefully this podcast will shed a bit of light on why we need to use pain as a signal and use it as a way to reprogram what's going on instead of avoiding it. Because too often when we get pain, we're always trying to avoid it, because I don't think anyone really, well, there's some people who like it in certain situations, but I don't think anyone really likes pain all of the time, persistent pain. Now, you could argue that point because there is an element of being that some people get caught in the state of mind that they use the pain as a way of getting out of things, and they use it, and what I mean by that is like letting themselves off the hook, and they use the pain as a way of, some people use it for sympathy. I've seen these things in different situations, and it's an interesting one because pain is so, it can really control your mind. It can really control your body and your mind. And it's no problem to use it in any situation, but when we're looking at trying to fix it and we're looking at trying to get over it, we need to reframe it, and we need to change that. And to do that, you actually kind of need to lose a certain part of yourself, which can be scary for people because it's a part that you can become comfortable with. And I've heard others talk about this before, where others who are coming off an addiction, let's say whether that's an alcohol addiction or if it's drug addiction, and they talk about getting off the addiction was difficult, obviously, but there was an element of it that they didn't want to lose themselves because it was a part of themselves that they knew. And the same thing can go for pain as well. It can be a part of yourself that you become comfortable with, and it's like, in a way, it's a part of your identity. And it's a part of your story or a part of your narrative. And we want to move away from that when we're, as much as we can, if it controls our lives. If we have to stop doing certain activities or stop doing certain exercises or can't meet social groups or can't play with our family, or the long term, it's not looking good for us, then we have to make change. And to make that change, the identity will have to change and it will have to be altered. And when that becomes altered, sometimes it feels like you're losing yourself a little bit. And the reason I want to talk about this is because in the back pain group this week, it was a really, really interesting one in our back pain back to exercise group. Because at the beginning, in the first video I put out, I tell people on between generally week 4 to week 6/7, you're going to run into a flare up. Okay, it's going to happen. We have to expect it to happen. And even if you do everything right at the start, if you've been dealing with this issue for 3, 6, 12 months up to, for some people it's been 15, 20 years, you have to expect that it's not just going to clear up with one exercise or one new movement. It's an approach, it's a lifestyle, it's a mindset that you need to take on that to get over this completely and to really, really get rid of it. And that's going to take time. So as I said, even if you do everything right at the start and it clears up, it's going to come back again. It didn't develop overnight, so it's not going to disappear overnight either. And when it comes back, it's actually an important part of the transformation. It's even more important to understand it will happen, or it happened before, and you have to understand that it's going to happen again. But if we approach it right, we can fix it. This is the same for any injury or any issue, but it becomes more important when you're looking at a persistent or a chronic one. And the reason being is that there's so many more elements to it than just the mechanical. It's never just the disc in your back. It's never just your knee that's giving problems. You know, it's never just your posture, or because your hips are tilted, or degenerative discs. It's never really just one thing. It's always a few things added together. And the mechanical might be there, but there's also a psychological and an emotional attachment to that as well that we need to address. And we can't address that when everything's going right, because when everything's going right, you won't recognize the patterns that pop up. So it's even more important to get an understanding of what happens before, what happens during, and then what happens after, and how you react. It's something we can't avoid, and something we actually don't want to avoid, because there are a lot of lessons to be learned. From every flare-up that you get, you can learn something from it. And especially if you have a longer-term strategy, and this is the thing in the group, we have a long-term strategy. We have a long-term goal. We know we're trying to get back to exercise. We know we're trying to get over this completely. We know we're trying to change our mindset around the issue, around the pain, around what's going on. And if we can do that, then we can start to put behaviors in place and build habits that will get rid of it long term. But you don't understand what they are unless it pops up. Okay, so there's so many tactics and so many strategies to get rid of pain short term. There's lots of different things you can do. But the thing is, every pain has a memory, it has a reaction, and there's an anxiety or a fear around it. And whether we like to admit it or not, there is a lot of fear around pain, because especially when it's something that comes back and you don't know what's going on, you start to worry, will it ever get better? What happens next? Have I done more damage? They're common thoughts. They happen to all of us. It's something that we need to improve on, and something that we need to work on, because I said that there's a lot of anxiety around that, and you don't have to have a chronic issue to deal with this. If you hurt your knee in a game, a lot of times you're going to have the same thoughts that come up, maybe a little shorter term, but they still will crop up. Okay, and so that's the thing, is that the emotional part of the brain rarely kicks up until we put it into that situation, and there's an emotional element to all of these injuries. That's the thing. So when you calm the first flare up, you're going to feel great. You're going to feel like, okay, I can see this is working. I'm delighted I can put things in place. I know it's going to calm it down. And you get this kind of false confidence around what's going on. And this is so important, because when you look at people who are dealing with a chronic back injury or a chronic neck pain or chronic shoulder pain, and when they go to a physio, and in a physio's position or a doctor's position, they have to give you something that helps you now. That's the thing. Okay, so we need to separate an acute issue where you pull a hamstring and go to a physio, or where you have a chronic issue where your shoulder injury that keeps coming back. Because when you go in and they give you 3 or 4 exercises to calm down the shoulder issue, that doesn't technically mean it's fixed. The mechanical side of it may be more conditioned, but the nervous system is still going to be a little bit wary of that area. And that's why when you go into a place and there's a new technique or a new gadget or a new exercise that can fix it, it only lasts a short time, because depending on the time that you get it and what's going on around you at the time and what you've heard about it before, your expectation going into it, all of these things play a huge role. If you go in and someone tells you there's this new machine, it's a decompression table, and they hang you on it and it completely decompresses your spine, which opens out all the discs, and then they give you this big story and big spiel. Or if they say that your hips are offline and that we can relocate your hips and relocate your back, and that's going to fix you, and you have a good expectation around that, you can calm down that alarm system short term, where you go in and they put you on the table and it stretches you out and you feel good right after it. But we're forgetting that if you had I'm going to just say this really quickly, is that obviously degenerative disc disease is not really that much of a thing. It's the same as having grey hair. It doesn't really make that much of a difference, because everyone has it. 50% of people over 30 have it with no pain, so it's very hard to relate it to your pain. I'm just putting that in there. It's important to understand that. So if you go to a decompression table and then they put you down and they open out all your joints and your bulging disc and whatever can start to reabsorb, all of that is a good idea in theory. But as soon as you get up, you adopt the same moving patterns, you adopt the same sleeping pattern, you adopt the same hydration and diet, you adopt the same thoughts and beliefs afterwards, it's just going to kick up again. You haven't really done anything. You've just put yourself in a position that stretched you out. It's like hanging from a bar. It's going to do the same thing. So we need to start looking at these like, okay, they might help us short term, but what do we do after to improve it? And the thing about it is, with the chronic injury, you're dealing with a neurological issue more so than a mechanical issue, and it's important to hold that in your mind. What we're dealing with is a faulty alarm system. It's just, when you're getting these things like these short-term fixes, or when you're going and you're trying out a new gadget and someone has told you this is really, really good, you're just turning it off the one time, but it doesn't actually mean that it's fixed. Okay, you're basically just turning off that alarm and you're going back as normal then. But if you haven't cleared out the alarm, we need to clean out the dust, we need to reset it, we need to refurbish it, we need to reprogram it to actually improve it. This is very close to home for me, because we used to have an alarm in the house downstairs that was full of dust, and in the middle of the night it would just start blaring off, and I would go down and I would just click the button to turn it off, to silence it. The same thing would happen the next night. The worst thing is the alarm was outside my room, even though the sensor was downstairs. It was right outside my room door. It really pissed me off. But I remember saying that, and then I was like, okay, right, I'm just turning it off here. We need to do something about this. And it was full of dust, so all we had to do was clear off the dust. It was that simple, and then it stopped happening. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be that simple for you. That doesn't mean that you get one exercise and it's going to fix it. But in one way, it does mean that there is a strategy to fix it. And once you know what that strategy is and you can lean into it, then you can actually improve it long term. So therefore, if we just focus on clearing it up one time and getting rid of the pain right now, in 6 weeks' time, we're going to be dealing with the same issue, but our fear around what has happened will increase massively. Okay, so your fear, okay, you've calmed the pain down because you've done 5 cat-cows and 2 Jefferson curls, and the pain has calmed down and the body's starting to relax because it's feeling more comfortable in itself. It doesn't need to be as protective. Now, come 6 weeks' time, you continue doing the exercises, you build up a tolerance to what you're doing, but you stay doing them at the same level anyway. You don't progress on them. You still have the same beliefs around what's going on. And bang, you get another big flare up. Now you start to feel, oh my God, I was doing everything right, or I thought I was doing everything right. I can't believe it. I'm after doing something wrong again. This is crazy. And now what you will do naturally is you will restrict your activities, your behaviors, your habits. You'll restrict your movements because you feel that you have done something wrong that has caused it to kick off again. Okay? This is the thing that is never addressed. Our fear around what happens increases massively, and because we feel like we've done something wrong. And that is exactly why I want you, when I'm working with you, to have a second flare up. I need you to have a second flare up. And if we can get a third one, all the better. Because I want you to become more aware of the emotional aspect of that flare up. How the anxiety kicks up. How the old patterns actually start to pick up. And the thought patterns start to come into place. This is the thing that we rarely focus on and we don't really realize. Because if you don't, you can fall back into the traps of the past and you can start to blame other things and look for new reasons around what's happening, when it's just a faulty alarm that's going off again because you never cleaned it, you never reprogrammed it. This is what needs to be dealt with. Otherwise, when you finish up, or when you go through, or you go to someone, or you go to a physio, or you go to a doctor, you go to a surgeon, you get something done, you say, that was a failed treatment. You can't really have a failed conservative treatment, because a treatment in itself should be an element of trial and error to it, where you go in, you try a couple of things out. How does that work? Does it work well? Perfect. Let's continue to push on with that. Does it not? What doesn't work? And then we change it around. That's the way it should be done. So it shouldn't be ever really failed. It's just when you fail, it's a lot of times is when people stop trying. And the thing about it is, in these cases, you're going to feel like you failed because it's the same issue that keeps kicking up over and over and over again, and it needs to be dealt with. So if we look at it holistically, we can start to see that, okay, there's other things that need to change, and we can start to address the physical, we can start to address the emotional, the cognitive, and then obviously the spiritual in other ways as well. And the good thing is that once you recognize the emotional patterns, once you see, okay, the pain is kicking up, I can't believe it's after happening to me again, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever, will I need to get surgery? And you continue to build, and you continue to build, and you continue to build. You won't recognize that until you're aware, okay, I've calmed it down once here, it's kicked up the second time, so now I can see what these thought patterns are, and I can start to control them, and I can start to improve on them. I can practice letting the ones go that are not helpful and keeping the ones that are helpful. You'll understand where the mind goes, what thoughts crop up first, how it changes your behavior, how it changes your habits. Then you can start overcoming it for good, but it's a process. Okay, you need that to happen. You need that traumatic, like anxious event to kick up so you can say, but you need it to kick up after you have the knowledge, okay, this is a neurological thing and you know how to improve it. After you have that knowledge, you need it to kick up so you can say, right, I can see this happened, I can see this happened, I can see this happened. I'm just going to stop one of them happening next time, and then I'll deal with the other two. And then you'll say, okay, I'll stop two of them happening the next time. And this is how it becomes. You get a flare up that's an 8 out of 10 and restricts you for 2 weeks. Then you get another one that's a 5 out of 10 and you don't get as much pain, but it's still kicking up and it's still in the background and it limits you for maybe 5 days. And then the third one, it's like a 2 or 3 out of 10. It's more of an annoyance and it's only limiting you for a couple of days. And then slowly but surely, then you work that away and you improve on it. And that's how you actually overcome it for good. It is a journey. It can be scary. It will be scary. And you're going to face fears. There's no question. No doubt in my mind that you are going to face different fears as you go through this. You're going to face pain. But in a year's time, or in 2 years' time, when you start to look back on it, and you can see where you were, and you understand what your position was, and you understand what your story was at that time, and you understand where you're at 2 years down the line, you can say that I've overcome that. There was a lower point in my life, but I was able to overcome it and I was able to improve on it. And now you've the confidence to start to live your life again. You have the confidence to start testing things out and trying new things and not living in fear of something's going to kick up. I'm going to be back in a bad position. I'm going to do something wrong and everything's going to go downhill. That doesn't happen because you have a completely different outlook on it. And you know if something kicks up that you can improve it and that you can fix it yourself. You know what thought patterns are going to happen and you can control them and improve on them, and you can put in new ones. You can reframe them early on. And that's the thing. That's how you do it. And now you'll have the confidence. That's when all of this pays off. And every story is going to have its setbacks along the way. You have to have it. As you change your story and you change your life and you improve the issue that you're dealing with and you improve the quality of life that you have and the type of lifestyle that you have, it's going to have setbacks. But a really simple quote that I'm going to finish on, important to understand it, is strength doesn't come from what you can do. It comes from overcoming what you thought you couldn't. And that's all I want to talk about today. That's everything that I wanted to go through. A nice short one where we can give you different ideas, different things to think on. If you're on the journey yourself to overcome one of these issues, I wish you all the best. If you do have any questions, you can shoot them over to me on Instagram at RobbieCassidy_ or RobbieCassidy_. Let me know how you're getting on, or you can email me at info@themobilitytutor.com. If you are interested in our Back Pain Back to Exercise group, we don't have another date yet, but if you check the link in this podcast, you can sign up. You can get in on the earlier bird price, or you can get in right now, let's say, and you will be able to kick off when everything gets going when the next program starts, and you'll get an email when it starts, but you'll have access to all the course materials anyway. And the very last thing is, if you enjoyed this podcast, I would love if you were able to rank it or rate it on Spotify. If you could give it a 5-star rating, it really, really helps to get the podcast out there, to help me get more people on it. And all you have to do is, if you just scroll up to the top of iTunes or the top of Spotify, I just hit the 5-star mark. I would really, really appreciate that. I want to get it up to 1,000 ratings, and it's way off it at the moment. But if I do, then the people, when I reach out to them, it gives me a lot more. It puts me in a way better position to get better guests on in future. And at the moment, I'm lining up some really cool guests, so I want to continue building on that. And I have some really good ideas for it as well, to give you a different perspective on how different people approach these issues, and in the topics of health, and the topics of mindset, and the topics of lifestyle. And hopefully, in the next while, I'll be able to get even more on to chat through these things. But that's all from me for now. I'd love if you could rate it. Thank you so much for listening, and I will chat to you all again next week. Have a good one.